We have got a few questions from the Chinese audience. There is this first one. Did the Japanese people know beforehand the government's decision to dilute and release the nuclear wastewater? What are the reactions and discussions among the Japanese people on this issue? That's from Alice Chan. Right. So I guess this question is for Professor OHASHI.
Yeah.
As well as AIHARA. If you can tell us more, yeah.
Okay, I try to answer some of the question. The Japanese government announced that probably dumping it to the ocean is only the way. It's so-called from their point of view, that's a sustainable solution. So here you see the announcement was long anticipated. 3 nuclear reactors at Fukushima plant suffered meltdown and blah, blah, blah. But anyhow, that announcement was gradually done. So it's not suddenly done. So most of the Japanese know that one day they will officially announce this dumping the polluted water to ocean. And of course, I show only one paper here. The fishermen shown very strong, stiff, disagreement. But someone already mentioned that Tokyo Olympic game was also called by our Prime Minister that this is Olympic for recovery, and many Fukushima people and the people like us totally distrusted, didn't believe that. This is all more obstruct for recovery. So of course, fishermen and also the people working in the ocean industries, they are very much against. We are also against, but many people feel that it is fed up. Even we continue to say, raise our voices. Our government will not positively respond. So we don't agree, but still we could not succeed to raise our voices continuously to change our government attitude. And second question is about, can I answer to that, this one too? This is energy source, electric energy source of Japan. After 2011, apparently this nuclear power station, nuclear energy, electricity is reducing, but gradually increasing. Instead, that was bad to our planet, that fossil fuel energy, electricity has increased so much after 2011. And our government policy to promote renewable energy is very slow and not consistent. Though it is much better than before, but we cannot really predict that how long this promotion energy of the renewable energy continues. But still, it is slowly growing. That is my answer so far. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. AIHARA, do you have anything to?
I have a very short comment. Local people are totally opposed to releasing the contaminated water, of course. So government and the typical opened the public hearing meeting, invited the local people, and so the speakers came from Fukushima. Some people came from another area. All the speakers disagree with releasing the water because still many people suffering from the contaminated environmental situation. But the government typically ignored their voices. So then it has already decided. So then we will do that. So then, and also, so we are considering about the secrecy, nuclear secrecy. If we ask and demanded to release the information about to the government and the TEPCO, so open up the information about releasing the contaminated water, but we couldn't get enough information from them. And then the local government, like municipal officials in Fukushima Prefecture has 59 local government, like a city, town, villages, prefectures, total 60. So in today's Greenpeace Japan's webpage show that more than 40 municipality, local government oppose, disagree with the releasing contaminated water. So, and included additionally, Fisherman Coalition, Forest Association, the local people will also disagree with the releasing of contaminated water to the ocean. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, AIHARA. Actually, another question from Alice too. I guess this one is firstly directed to Japan, obviously, but I guess this applies to the situation in South Korea or even internationally. After the nuclear disaster, are there any suggestions on the future development of green energy? Should nuclear energy development be just abandoned, or should it be postponed until the technology is fully matured? Could Masaaki or AIHARA, comment on this, or of course Professor Lee, Seejae, and Rebecca. Rebecca, there's another question. The next question is for you. Okay, so yeah. Anyone jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I guess Masaaki first, and AIHARA, please.
Yeah. We are, of course, we are opposing to. I mean, as I say, that nuclear renewable energy is gradually growing, but not that much high speed, which it should be. And government never gave up idea to abandon the nuclear power station. They don't clearly say that they will continue it, but actually they want to continue it. So now, last few years, our government clearly say that about 20% of the core energy in Japan would come from nuclear. Of course, other sources, especially this renewable energy should be increased, but still they want to keep it 20%. Maybe AIHARA-san can correct me that should correct from the nuclear energy. So that is why they still try to reoperate some, listing and stopping nuclear energy reactors in near future. So still 2 reactors ongoing construction, but I don't know the fate of those construction. I don't know. This is my answer.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. And technology is very difficult in Fukushima. Decommissioning operation is sometimes a huge deadlock. TEPCO introduced the robots technology, but it's the robots are down on the reactor side because of radiation, highly radiation issues, something that, so then it's difficult to introduce a new technology to the decommissioning operation. And also we are faced on that another green energy technologies. But after Fukushima nuclear power plant accident, many farmers couldn't do the farming because of contaminated soil. Instead of doing the farming, the many rice field and vegetable field turned to the solar panel field. So because it's like a special area to put it on the new green energy of solar panel, but we are now still discussing. After 10 years or 20 years, 30 years, these solar panel will make in old. So then we have to throw away these panels. We have much garbage or much debris from the solar panel. The local government, Fukushima Prefecture, now introducing and starting and put on the much money, new planning or technology that called innovation cost plan. It's introducing drone training center and decommissioning drill centers. It's a national government and the local Fukushima Prefecture government introduced planting new technologies in the radiation contaminated coast area in Fukushima. But there are no local people understand. So for whom? For what? So not clearly for the local people, just it's for money, for the company, for the technology of the drone. What is the meaning to the drone for the local people? So that there are big questions.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, I think, Professor Lee or Rebecca or Kinchi,
Yeah, so my answer is this. 40 years ago, I actually had very much the same kind of arguments with friends of mine in the peace movement who we were all against the nuclear weapons, but I had a lot of friends who were against nuclear energy. And I kept arguing this with them and saying, well, look, the problem, is that the nuclear waste problem hasn't been solved with nuclear energy, that therefore we need to put more resources into solving this. And it's maybe a little known anecdote that can illustrate where I was coming from, because in the early 1970s, I was a physics student and I was actually studying nuclear physics. And I did so because of the acid rain from the coal-fired power plants of the UK were destroying forests across Europe. And so I was an early environmentalist, and I went to university to study physics because I hoped that I could be one of the people that could solve the nuclear waste problem, which seemed to be the main obstacle for the cheap, safe, clean, democratic energy, as people thought about it. And I can and I can remember having an argument with the professor when I objected to the fact that we were being taught by some of the scientists from the nuclear bomb factory at Aldermaston, which was 100 miles down the east of, I went to Bristol University, the bomb factories of Aldermaston that I mentioned before. They were coming to our university and basically giving us PR and offering us incentives to go and work for them. And I complained about this back in the 70s. And I can really remember the very patronizing way in which my professor spoke to me. Remember, I was one of a very tiny number of girls studying nuclear physics at that time. He said patronizingly, "My dear girl, don't you realize they're all the same thing? It's all the same technologies." That's what he said. And I suddenly realized I couldn't carry on studying physics. It was one of the major kind of, I really had a trauma because I had to leave that course, which meant probably leaving the university. But I was rescued by a philosophy lecturer that got me in to do a philosophy course. And anyway, that's how I did my degree in the end. But my point is, I then sat for 6 years as a board member of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. I listened to people argue for thorium reactors, for nuclear fusion, for being able to build much smaller nuclear fusion related reactors, for all these technological fixes, but they all had problems of safety, problems of security, or problems of proliferation dangers into weapons. And by the mid-1980s, I had actually joined those who said, we actually have to campaign for them together. So my answer is, nuclear energy actually has to be abandoned apart from, and I do make this caveat, that there are still some important medical, in particular, uses, but that can be supplied by extremely small and fully safeguarded reactors to make those specific kinds of isotopes. And there's enough uranium in the world to supply that, so we don't ever need to mine any more uranium on indigenous lands or anywhere.
Thank you, Rebecca. I see a few more questions. Maybe we can just come back to this too. If Seejae or Kinchi has got other comments, let's go on to the next question, which is for, I guess, Rebecca again. Right. Yeah, the PowerPoint showed the rise in the cost of nuclear power. Why is that the case? With the advancement in technology, shouldn't the cost decline? Is it because the hidden costs have been included?
Well, thank you for that question. That's another very, very interesting question. I'm not a nuclear economist, but I understand from those who are that there are a number of factors and reasons, and it also depends somewhat on the national and local context and circumstances. But these are the ones that I think factor in. One, yes, I do think, depending on the countries and their levels of democratic oversight and questioning public and all this sort of thing, the costs can no longer be hidden as the UK and others did in the 50s and early 60s. Second, the issue of economies of scale. The fact is, far fewer countries want nuclear energy. They don't need it. They don't want it. And that goes back to the point I made in the PowerPoint, that when you look at the countries still trying to get nuclear energy, and you look Saudi Arabia, countries like that, and what you are seeing is a country that wants to have an option, a technological, structural, infrastructural option to turn it into nuclear weapons at some point, perhaps. But that's part of their decision-making process. But apart from them, hardly any new nuclear power plants are being constructed. And so when you've got that situation, the more expensive every individual nuclear construction is, the more expensive it becomes because there are so fewer. Third goes to the question of environmental oversight has increased in many countries, if not all. And so constructors and governments have to, they can't get away with cutting corners. They have to meet environmental requirements and regulations and so on. And so that increases costs. And they have to, keep up with the technologies, et cetera, et cetera. The fourth is, and it's very much connected with the third, well, connected with all, we now do, a lot of countries actually have to factor in waste, have to factor in the expense, environmental, financial, and frankly, unsolvable problems of what do you do with the waste when you've finished either you're left with a spent fuel, or you're recycling it in and out of nuclear weapons and so on. But the waste remains a problem that has not been solved, and not at all anywhere like on the scale. I know about the Finnish deep repository. It can only deal with a tiny fraction. So that's another, that increases the cost, because some governments at least are requiring that those costs be factored into contracts and into political decision making. And that's also been leading to kind of nuclear allergies locally and nationally. And there's you see this with Hinkley Point that I mentioned before. EDF now Aviva, the French nuclear constructors, actually pulled out of Hinkley because they couldn't afford to build it at the contract cost that the UK government was offering, and that left China as the sole constructor willing to go forward. And there are reasons for that, of course. And Hinkley was nearly halted at that time by the government. I think that was around 2016. And it was saved essentially by the heavy lobbying from defense contractors that would both nuclear contractors that would both benefit also, but also by the Chinese government, I have to say, who lobbied very heavily to carry on with that. So these are all factors, I think, why the costs keep escalating and new technologies aren't solving any of those problems.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. We've got another question from Rafaela De Wantari De Vianto. Forgive me if I pronounce it, wrong. She asks regarding framing of nuclear energy in Japan, whose voice is the strongest, the most opinion leading? I guess the question is directed at our Japanese speakers, our speakers from Japan.
Yeah, okay. Let me try. This is OHASHI speaking, and let me try to answer. It's a good question and a tough answer to properly reply. I just made a slide. Just a minute. Hey, I cannot control it well. Hey. The Japan and political scene, LDP, ruling LDP, Liberal Democratic Party is very much is a strong supporter of the nuclear energy, but most of the opposition party, most of them are very progressive characters. Has rather against, but the problem is that the LDP is supported by big industrial houses and capitalists, and those progressive parties, opposition parties, are supported by biggest trade union, that is Japanese Trade Union Confederation, so-called LEUNG. This is a huge. Not that much huge, but anyhow, the biggest trade union. And though they are a good supporter of the progressive parties, but only in terms of the nuclear power energy policy, they are still in favor of it. Because maybe, a large number of its members belong to the energy sectors, and they are in favor of the nuclear power stations. And LEUNG also, the trade union also afraid that if nuclear power generation is ended, many jobs will be lost, which I don't agree that renewable energy will create more jobs, but maybe this is a kind of fear. So that is why some opposition party could not get together to raise their voices. Of course, we have to change the voices of the LDP. But, if we go to the opinion poll, I think a majority of the people are against the nuclear power energy. So LDP try to convince the people gradually, because some people might forget about those 2011 issues. So LDP government is carefully voicing, enlarging their voices to restart more nuclear stations. So LDP is more politically big voices, but people's voices are against. But because of this LEUNG, this biggest trade union, opposition party cannot really unite it. So the station still, stands still, and LDP is recovering, keeping the original position. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
AIHARA,
Yes.
okay.
I'm briefly have a comment. So For as a media person, now in Japan, the pro-nuke and the non-nuke person or sector is just a parallel world. I think as a media should be voice up non-nuke person because people still suffering. So I hope that Japanese media should be standing on the side of the local people now suffering people. But in Japan is a severe situation. Media lost the power because many media is under the umbrella of the huge money company, Dentsu or some advertise company. So then it's a huge barrier. So connecting with people. So now, like me, the independent journalists are fighting and writing the situation, but the mainstream media like TV or public broadcasting systems, so something that sometimes ignore, but some journalists in the company are fighting or reporting the good news. So it's a kind of the pushing it down and pushing down. So go forward and sometimes back into like fighting right now.